Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Citizens Advisory Committee for the Transportation Authority, Contra Costa County. This evening, we have a full agenda on board here, and we do have a quorum. My name is Yolanda Vega. I chair the committee, along with representatives of the other cities and municipalities here. Are there any members of the public who have any comments? I have not received a word, okay. I would like the committee to look at this summary of actions and entertain a motion. I will need to indicate who made the motion and who seconded. So I have a motion from Bruce. Put your.
I would like to add in section 2.2 that motion to approve was made by Member Yao and second by Member Miller, and carried unanimously by members present.
So noted.
Thank you.
So your motion is made with those corrections.
That's all I can find.
Okay. So I have a motion from Bruce to approve.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, I have a second for approval. All those in favor, please indicate by stating aye.
Aye.
Those against indicate by stating nay. And abstentions. Seeing none, it passes. In general business, if you will please look at the attendance log to ensure that your attendance is correctly noted. And if there are any changes, to advise staff. I do need to make an announcement. We've lost another member. I'm beginning to think it's me, okay? Seriously. So J.P. McDermott will not be with our group. He is moving, actually. So he did send an email and thanked everyone on the committee, and his tenure is over. So we will now also be looking for a representative again from Danville. And I just want to know, as far as procedure, I'd like to make sure that he receives a letter of appreciation. And I'm sure that you've sent the others letters of appreciation also.
Yes, and if you'd like, we can actually draft a card and we can send it out to him once he gets to San Diego from all the CAC members.
I think that would be nice. Yeah, I think he'd be pleased by that. Thank you. And also, I'd like to bring your attention to the meeting calendar for the different other committees and commissions that are being held throughout the year. So we have several city members present this evening, so we can review their compliance checklist. And first on the agenda is the City of Walnut Creek. And on your letter, Ozzy, I would like to just bring your attention to the letter that was sent to you June 17th, signed by Martin Engelman. The last date there showing that the authority will review your compliance checklist on June 17th. It's July 17th. So just wanted to make sure you caught that. Okay, thank you. And also, do you want questions while you are presenting, or do you want us to wait until you're done?
I think we'll wait until the end if that's okay with you all.
All right, so we will do that. And please, everyone, cell phones either off or on vibrate. And we will address everyone's questions, so only one question at a time.
Awesome. Thank you. Good evening. My name is Ozzy Arce. I'm a transportation planner for the city of Walnut Creek. Thank you for having me this evening. I will briefly touch on a few of the items from the checklist, but really the presentation focuses on two areas. It'll be development and transportation. Development, I'll mainly highlight some housing development projects from the calendar years 2016 and 17, but I'll dive into a few community commercial as well as just commercial facilities that we've developed. As well, I'll shift over to a conversation around the transportation that we've done for those calendar years. Just briefly starting with some notable general plan amendments. The city did have two, one for the Marriott Residence Inn, which was a general plan amendment to allow for the construction of a 160-room hotel. It is BART proximate. The second notable general plan amendment was for this residential called 2211 Residences, and that was 52 market rate apartments. However, that is also BART proximate. Other notable developments during that calendar year, on that very left, you see 1380 North California site. For those of you familiar with our downtown, that's the former McDonald's site, and that'll be repurposed to a mixed-use project consisting of a 6-story building with approximately 77 residential units and 20 hotel rooms. That is also BART proximate. On the right, top right, you see Trinity Condominiums, which is a 12-unit residential condo, what's also BART proximate. And on the bottom is 1716 Lofts, which are 42 market rate lofts, also BART proximate. Other notable developments, we have the 2 residential care facilities, which are major expansions to existing residential care facilities. On the top, you see Tiffany Court is a 24-bed, and on the bottom is a 40 residential memory care facility. Now, more on the commercial, community commercial side of things, Carondelet Athletic Complex was a major redevelopment of that site, which included tennis, softball, soccer, lacrosse, and aquatic facilities. Again, that's for the Carondelet High School in Concord. However, their facilities are in the city of Walnut Creek. The other notable developments on the top right you see, which is a Broadway Plaza promenade building, which became the Apple building. And then we've had some notable car dealerships redevelop as well, Subaru and Volvo. More on the exciting things, which is the transportation side, at least for my wheelhouse, being a transportation planner. During the calendar years, we had the opportunity to do a ribbon cutting and unveil several of these new all-electric trolleys that you see in our downtown. What's unique about these is that they're not only all-electric, but it's inductive charging at the BART station. So when they're waiting for more passengers at the BART station, at the same time, the bus is charging. And that was, we learned that we were one of the, County Connection being one of the first public transit agencies to do that inductive charging while on course, while on route. So that was very exciting for us. And in addition to that all electric, we also had the opportunity more recently to move those headways from that free trolley that you see in our downtown from 15 minutes to 12 minutes to try to increase the efficiency of that route. It's one of our most productive routes in the entire County Connection fleet, and so we want to enhance that and further drive productivity. And there's a map of the route. It's the pink line, and it comes from the BART station, and it leads to major development and shopping centers in our downtown. And lastly, I'd like to touch on some of the grants that we received during these calendar years from CCTA. Most notably is the project that I'm heading up right now, which is called Rethinking Mobility. It's a transportation demand management plan that has 3 objectives. One is to reduce our dependency on the automobile by trying to strategize parking management strategies. 2 is try to encourage active modes such as biking, walking, and this shared micromobility space. And 3 is to encourage this idea of public transportation first, especially in our downtown that has that free trolley. So I encourage you to visit our project website, www.rethinkingmobilitywc.com. We're in phase 3 of the project, but very much looking for public input. Second, we also received another grant from CCTA. This was about $850,000 grant. The previous one, I forgot to note, was about $225,000. This one being an $850,000 grant to, this is more of a brick and mortar grant to install over 20 bus shelters in our downtown. And now what originally started as a bus shelter only vision grew into this idea of a mobility hubs. So rather than just having the standard bus shelter, which is very much the main objective of the project, we also looked at how we can increase and improve the sidewalk and ADA access. But not only that, in the shared micromobility space and in the space that the transportation field is moving, how can we include also transit improvement facilities and transit support facilities such as technology or shared micromobility, scooters, bike share, along with these bus shelters. So they serve more as a hub and spoke, that mobility hubs concept, rather than just the traditional bus shelter. So that's a brief overview of some of the calendar year 2016-17, not only the development projects, but the exciting transportation projects that we have forth. Again, I'm here to answer any questions, and my colleague Andy Smith, who heads up the Long Range and Transportation Planning Division, is also here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ozzy. So questions or comments from the committee?
Yes, I have one. Ozzy, I noted several times early in your presentation that you talk about a site being BART proximate. Mm-hmm. How do you define that? Half a mile or so?
It's a half a mile, and we do have parcels outlined in our general plan that are designated as BART proximate. And so we look at that general plan map when new projects come in to designate whether or not they're within a parcel that has been designated as BART proximate.
Other questions and comments? Kent?
Yeah, I had a question. It's a housing question. I was looking at the number 3 section in the checklist, the housing options section, where it says, has the authority demonstrated reasonable progress in providing housing opportunities for all income levels in its housing element? And then I looked at in the attachments, there's a table B that talks about, it's the annual element progress report. It's talking about how the city is doing as far as the progress as far as meeting the regional housing needs allocation. And it shows 4 years there. I think it's 2014 to 2017. And 3 of those years, there's basically no permits issued for moderate or below. 1 year, 2016, there's a handful of moderate and below, but really it's not even putting a dent in the regional housing allocation numbers. There's still, it's not even touching them. And then in the housing that you talked about in the PowerPoint, it was all market rate. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, I wonder if that's really reasonable progress towards opportunities for all income levels. It doesn't really look like it's headed in that direction.
I appreciate that question, Ken, and it's probably best answered by my colleague, Andy.
Hi there, Andy Smith. I'm head of long-range transportation planning for the City of Walnut Creek. I'm also secretary of the Transportation Commission. Very good points to make. We actually have a fairly thorough affordable housing program in Walnut Creek, and that involves both the construction of housing and collection of fees that is then used towards other construction of housing, and a lot of this was just had to do with the cyclical timing of development with regard to affordable housing. I will say that there are actually some of the projects that were under review during this time period and are noted in Table A of Attachment 3A-1 were some affordable multifamily developments that are actually very close to the BART station. One in particular was the Riviera project that was actually two buildings built across, well, down the street from one another for a total of 58 units, and I believe those were all to low income, or as a combination of very low income, mostly very low income, in fact, and low income, and one moderate income unit. And then also around this time period, I don't know if it was under review with this one, and I should say, by the way, those Riviera projects, they're coming very close to completion. And there's another one, St. Paul's Commons, which is under construction, and we're expecting it to be completed by the end of the year. Also BART proximate, that's 45 units to basically formerly homeless, and that's in conjunction with Trinity Center. Both of these projects, the city contributed actually many millions of dollars, mostly towards land acquisition, and the development of those projects was in conjunction with nonprofit affordable housing developers. We have an inclusionary housing ordinance that requires that 10% of all new housing be provided at income restricted to families of moderate income or lower. You can also do lower income and a lower percentage. Or the developers have, in some cases, the option to pay fees into our program, which we then use to help build projects such as these ones that I just mentioned. We also have, we recently amended our regulations for ADUs, accessory dwelling units. We actually went beyond the state mandated requirements. We did away with our owner occupancy requirements. We've allowed for some larger units to allow for more family-sized dwellings. And just to show how things are helping with that, in 2018, we actually issued final inspections, the completion of 13 ADUs. So far this year, we've had 10, so we're on track to probably double the number in this year. That's just a sampling of some of the projects. We do take affordable housing very seriously. Of course, it's very challenging because construction is expensive and land is expensive.
Thank you. Haley?
Oh, yeah, I just had a question. Could you talk a little bit more about the bike share amenities at the bus shelters?
So that's for the Mobility Hubs project, that's still part of the conversation. Part of the Mobility Hubs vision is to have an existing partnership with an operator, whether that be a bike share operator and or a scooter operator that we would then partner with and work to facilitate the parking of these shared micromobility vehicles at these bus shelters, right? So that's still to be worked out, but the vision is that these two things would align.
Other comments?
One other
Kent.
question. Yeah, it's a transportation question. In the very first attachment where you're talking about how the city's responded to the action plans that apply to the city, it says that the city continued to implement its complete streets policy contained within Walnut Creek. It's great that the city has a complete streets policy. I was just wondering if, off the top of your head, you knew of some examples of how that's being implemented.
I can do that.
You want to do Lincoln now?
Oh, my microphone is still on. So there's I'll start actually just from kind of the more the simple end. Whenever our public works department does roadway maintenance, resurfacing streets and the like, in almost every case, we wind up adding new bicycle facilities. And so, just as an example, last week my wife was out of town, and so I was taking my son to a different sports camp, and to a different area of town on a road that I hadn't been on in a few years, and I noticed that there was actually buffered bike lanes serving this junior high where I was dropping them off, and that was simply because the city had resurfaced the street, and so we take advantage of those opportunities to try to create new facilities such as that. We also are in the very beginning stages of looking to update what is now a standalone bicycle master plan and pedestrian master plan, and I'm actually trying to work with our traffic engineering division, or am working with our traffic engineering division to hopefully actually update the two together in conjunction with a complete streets design, new complete streets design standards for the city's roadway standards. I'm very hesitant to be saying this because it's very early on, of course, but we are definitely working in that direction.
And lastly, the Lincoln Avenue Complete Streets Project, which is the street south of the Walnut Creek Library, had a recent pilot program that converted on-street parking to a Class 4 bicycle facility, which is a vertical and a horizontal delineation on the street. It was a pilot program. As you can imagine, the community had a lot of questions around the repurposing of parking for an on-street bicycle facility. So I encourage you to check that out as well. The pilot, I think, just ended, and we're looking at analyzing in the future of that. Lincoln Avenue.
Other comments and questions? I have a question about housing regarding the BART proximate. They will provide affordable housing?
If it falls under the inclusionary housing, yes, but not all BART proximate parcels need to accommodate for affordable housing. It could just be, they're just designated as BART proximate.
And the St. Paul's Trinity Center, that's for the homeless or for senior citizens?
That's for very low income individuals, mostly or households, I should say, mostly towards the who will then be the formerly homeless. Yeah, we have a lot of senior housing, of course, in Walnut Creek, and in fact, 25% of our population in Walnut Creek is 65 years of age or older, and so we have a fair bit of that. But of course, affordable senior housing is very much a challenge, as any affordable housing. We don't currently have any affordable senior housing in the pipeline under construction, but we do have from just a few years prior to this reporting period. Trying to remember how many units. It was Villa Vasconcelos, which is near the intersection of North Main and Geary Treat. It was 100% affordable for seniors development, and the number 178 units is what comes to mind, but I'm not entirely sure if that's accurate, but it's a large project.
Two things I want to commend you on. I want to commend you on that free shuttle. That is so cool. So cool. You get off BART, and then you just get on that free shuttle, and it takes you, and it's convenient. I mean, it's not as if it goes to places where people won't go to. So it's good to see that it's in use. The city of Oakland uses something similar to that, which is commendable for them too. The other thing I'd like to mention is your ADUs. Hooray! I know those homeowners are happy. So good for you.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. Other comments or questions? So as our tradition is, we usually ask for the representative of our city to make the motion to accept your compliance checklist, and for that I would ask Ken.
Okay, yes, I would like to make the motion to accept Walnut Creek's compliant checklist.
Second.
So I have a motion to accept, and I have a second. All those in favor, please signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And abstentions. So it passes. So the next date is for you to meet on July 10th, and I know you'll be present. You know the drill.
Correct.
And with the authority, it's not June 17th as the letter states, it's July 17th.
Awesome. Thank you all for your time tonight.
Yeah, thanks, Ozzy. Good seeing you. The next compliance checklist is the City of Pinole. Hi, Tamara. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Tamara Miller. I'm the Development and Services Director and City Engineer for the City of Pinole. And I have a very small report to present. Pinole is a small city, fairly built out, so we don't have the same level of excitement that you have in a city like Walnut Creek. The document submitted shows that we had 2 projects in Pinole to share with you. One was a commercial business in a new regional business center, Orange Theory. Another one of our significant projects was I'm sorry, I'm looking for my notes. it says Happy Noodle, a noodle restaurant, which we're actually building now. So even though this was reported on for the 2016 and 2017 calendar year, it's taken a while to get through the permit process. Pinole has built, during the reporting period, 3 housing units in 2016 and 2 housing units in 2017. And those 5 housing units in those 2 years are more than double the housing units we spent over or built in town over the prior 10 years. So again, small but important improvements in Pinole. I really don't know what else to share with you. We are working on our development impact fees, revising those to better suit the city of Pinole. We've been working on them since about 2017, and we're making some progress. We've done small things in town to support transit-oriented development. The Orange Theory shop space actually had a bus stop created as part of that shop space, so we're happy about that. Really, that concludes my presentation, and I'm available for questions.
Well, this isn't a question. Excuse me. This isn't a question. It's just I'm curious because I don't know Pinole that well. What is happening in Pinole? You know better than anybody. What are the things that we should note other than what you just expressed?
Well, it's interesting to look at the reporting years and then what's happening now. Pinole is a small, built-out community. We have no space to grow. We have no serious vacant land. So we're experiencing basically a really lightweight redevelopment. In the last 2 years, we've seen a lot more applications for projects. And, when we come back next time for our checklist, we'll be able to share that. In the last 3 months, we've looked at applications for over 100 housing units, many in the low to moderate levels. So we're excited that we're going to be able to kind of tip that little scale. The units I shared, the 3 and the 2, those are all single-family parcels. So just a house here, an ADU here, but we are looking at some redevelopment opportunities on San Pablo Avenue. So Pinole, as a city, small and built out, towards the north end of West Contra Costa County is finally looking attractive to regional housing. So things are changing. We're keeping busy.
The other thing is, what about congestion issues in Pinole vis-a-vis 80 and San Pablo Avenue?
Well, anecdotally, the I-80 mobility project with the ramp metering did seem to make an impact on local city congestion. I think it helped I-80 move things forward. And basically, we experience what most towns experience for congestion, 8 a.m. regional commute, local commute, and high school drop-off, and 3 o'clock school pickup, and 5 o'clock commute. We haven't seen congestion change significantly, just a minor bit in town. But we have constricted real estate, so this is something that our community is going to have to live with.
Kent.
Oh, talk about, please, your auxiliary dwelling unit policies.
Can you please repeat that?
Yes, your granny unit policy. I used to refer to as granny units more than.
Our ADU policy?
Yes, please.
We recently adopted a pretty flexible ADU policy. We do require that one of the parcel or one of the units be owner occupied, but it could be either. We also have some restraints on the space of the second unit, and mostly that has to do with how it's treated for development impact fees and how it's treated for the permit process. But I think it seems to be fairly successful because we don't have much issue when we have applicants applying for ADUs, and prior to the reporting year, we didn't have much going on, but in the last year and a half, we've seen a lot more ADUs, including one on Property Brothers, if anybody saw it.
So you're nationwide known, the little city of Pinole. Other comments and questions? So again, as is our tradition, to ask that we have the representative have the motion. So Kent? Oh, there you are.
Here I am. I move that this committee approve Pinol's GMP checklist.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Bruce. So I have a first and a second. And all those in favor, please signify by stating aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, nay. And those who are, I just went blank. Thank you. Abstain. So it passes. Duh. So, okay, Tamara, again, on your letter from Martin, it states that your review with the authority is July 10th. Oh, excuse me, with the planning committee is July 10th, and then the review with the authority is not June 17th, it's July 17th.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us. Good evening, and good luck to you. Oh, God, here comes Concord. So new faces. And we're very friendly. We ask questions, but we're very friendly. So you introduce yourself.
Good evening, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Winnie Chung. I'm the Transportation Program Manager for the City of Concord. I'm here tonight with my colleagues, Abhishek Parikh, the Transportation Manager, Michael Cass, the Long Range and Sustainability Policy Planner, and Bernard Renville with CIP Manager. So we are all new here at the City of Concord in our respective positions, and so I brought a lot of support to answer questions later on. I want to thank you for the opportunity now to present to you the City of Concord's Measure J compliance checklist for calendar years 2016 and 2017. The city believes it is in compliance with the requirements of the checklist for the reporting period. I just want to highlight a few items on the checklist. We had one general plan amendment approved in 2016, which was for downtown specific plan boundary designation change for 6 parcels within the North Concord Avenue area between Highway 242 and Bonifacio Street. The purpose of that amendment was to bring an existing legal non-conforming automotive-oriented uses into conformance. And we changed the designation from downtown mixed use to West Concord mixed use. This amendment had no effect on the city's ability to meet growth management strategy, growth management standards or action plan policies, and it did not result in any significant impacts on traffic or routes of regional significance. Other activities that occurred in 2016 and 17 during the reporting period was the city adopted a citywide pedestrian and bicycle master plan, which established a 20-year vision for improving the walking and biking environment within the city itself. And then in early 2017, a bicycle and pedestrian advisory committee was formed to help review and provide input to staff on complete streets features and conformity to the master plan. As far as housing, during the reporting period, the city issued permits for 133 housing units, 25 of which were low or very low income serving household units. Some of the major developments that were approved in 2016 was, well, this is one, Veranda Retail Center off of the I-680 corridor. That was a TIS was done consistent with CCTA's technical procedures, and that TIS was incorporated into an EIR for the project. In 2017, the city selected a master developer for the Concord Naval Weapons Station reuse specific plan area, and work continues today on a specific plan and formulating that and an EIR process. In terms of the urban limit line, there were no actions taken with respect to modifications to the voter-approved urban limit line. And that concludes my presentation tonight. Happy to take questions.
So comments, questions?
You want to go? On the reuse plan, do you have an idea when you're actually going to break ground on something there?
The planning process is still ongoing now. 2025 is the best estimate at this point.
That was really my question that Ken mentioned, but could you just provide a little bit more information, if you have it, as to what we might expect with the development of the former weapons station?
The first phase of it is in process. We are looking at TOD development around the North Concord BART station area, which encompasses about 500 acres, about 4,000 residential dwelling units, and about approximately 1.5 million square feet of commercial space.
And to elaborate, that's just the first 500 acres that the master developer that's been selected will be developing as part of the first phase. We are in the process of developing a specific plan, which is under administrative review by staff at this point in time. To give you a scale, that's envisioning close to 13,000 dwelling units. Of those 13,000 dwelling units, approximately 25% will be affordable.
And I guess we will hear more as time goes on about the transportation issues that are going to be manifested from a massive development like that.
I'll provide a little bit of context on that. So currently we are working with through Transpac and Transplan. We've already reached out to a number of jurisdictions to identify any intersections or roadway segments of concern to incorporate into our analysis. And as the traffic analysis is completed, it will be presented to Transpac and Transplan, and mitigations identified and are feasible will be documented in the report. So at some point, all the jurisdictions that are impacted will hear about it.
Thank you.
Our newest representative, new kid on the block from Oakley.
I had a question. Since you're discussing, this is, if I'm not mistaken, it's very near to Port Chicago BART station. So has there been specific bike bridges or certain types of things that would make transit easier for those 13,000 units that would be going across? And majority, guess a lot of people would like to use that specific BART station. Have there been any studies, or has there been any ideas about getting certain type of maybe grant-funded bike or transit-related ways or bridges or whichever thing would make transit easier through that side?
Yes, there's a number of major projects identified in the overall roadway network, including Class 1 bike paths, Class 4 bike lanes. High-frequency transit is the goal right now at 7.5 minute to 10-minute headway, so that we can have direct connection based on BART schedules. There is also a transit spine planned in the project that connects the southern part of the project to the northern section, and that would have an exclusive transit lane so that we can provide high-efficiency connectivity to BART station and encourage more of transit usage.
Have you guys spoken with County Connection or whichever runs the bus entity for that area about having like a shuttle that would go back and forth to BART, similar to how they have it for like the San Ramon Bishop Branch Express, something like that?
So currently, we haven't identified as to who is going to be running those shuttles. We have had conversations with County Connections, and the master developer is also looking at other possible options.
Thank you.
Okay.
My question has to do with the open space. I believe that a large portion of the 5,000 acres was going to be dedicated to open space. Is that still in planning?
Correct. So of the approximately 5,000 acres, about half of that is intended to be transferred to the East Bay Regional Park District. There also is open space throughout the remaining 2,500 acres in the forms of parks, greenways, and other amenities.
Thank you. And a follow-up question on development. You mentioned retail and residential, and I believe in early planning there was going to be a campus established for one of the college systems. Is that still in the plans?
So some sort of campus is envisioned. We have a Blue Ribbon Task Force that's comprised of representatives from Cal State University system, as well as the University of California system, local community colleges, high schools, et cetera, where there's been some research and investigation about the possibility of having some sort of center of higher learning, if feasible.
Okay.
I'd like to do a follow-up question on that, and I have another question. If you got your wish and it became a Cal State campus, what would happen to the Cal State campus up on Ignatia Valley Road?
So no decision's been made yet, so that I can't provide an answer at this time.
And second question, on your transportation, your road network in the reuse area, will there be an exit onto, I guess, Kirker Pass and also onto Treat?
So there will be a connection through the existing roadway network onto Kirker Pass, not a direct connection onto Kirker Pass, but there will also be similar type of situation for Treat, where new roadways will connect to existing, providing connection into Treat.
So if I was actually living there or working there, I could actually come out and go out to Kirker Pass?
That's correct.
Okay.
Other comments or questions? I have a few comments. 14,000 new residents. Are those single-family homes?
It's a combination of both multifamily and single-family.
Holy mackerel. I do commute through that Port Chicago highway, and believe it or not, I am on that road at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I question my sanity, but I have to be at a meeting there at 5. It's I find myself looking around and thinking, who are you people? And why are you here at 3 o'clock? Why aren't you still working? I just can't even imagine what that's going to look like with an additional 14,000 homes. So just saying. The other thing is putting nobody scream at me, putting in another university campus there. I think what we might want to be looking really at is either career centers or an extension of the community colleges. I think that that's really one of the things that we need desperately, and then let them go on to university. Their parents want them to move out anyway, so why are you keeping them here? I would look into that. Concord is a very dynamic and exciting place. You've got a lot of history in your town. You've done great things with Total Plaza Center. Who would have thought 20 years ago that it's just vibrant? And so I tip my hat to you. Just want you to recognize the tremendous impact of having that kind of development, and perhaps looking to see what the community needs as far as an education center. I look at Los Madonnas College and what they've done. What a great resource they've been to the community. So just saying. Other comments, questions? If not, then I would entertain that the representative of Concord make a motion, but they're not here. So I would like to extend that invitation to the representative of Pleasant Hill. Haley?
Yes, motion to approve checklist for City of Concord.
Okay, then I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Yes.
Okay, Patricia, second. See, our representative from Oakley, you're not that fast yet. And so I have a first and I have a second. All those in favor, please note by stating aye.
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 And those opposed, nay. And abstentions. So it passes. And your letter is accurate. Your dates are accurate. July 10th with the Planning Committee and July 17th with the authority.
Thank you very much.
So good luck to you. Thank you so much for coming. Get here earlier next year. So just
Yolanda, just kind of want to reiterate a little bit here about your statement that a lot of these students, are in colleges, and the community colleges are so important and everything, and that the parents would like for them to move out anyway later. They're not going anywhere. The millennials are staying home.
I know.
Sorry.
It doesn't hurt to dream. Well, the reason I stated that is because I think that we get caught up in thinking you need a college degree. And in today's day and age, with technology being what it is, what you need is a career certificate, and you can get that in some careers. You can get a certificate in a year, and boom, you're working. Some have work study. So I thought, we should look at that kind of educational opportunity and make those a lot more accessible. And especially with Port Chicago and the other different areas that we're looking at building up, and in fact ensuring that we've got public transportation, because that seems to be the thing that just it's tricky. We've got the opportunities, we've got the resources, and then people say, well, how do I get there? I don't have a car. And there isn't a bus service. So I just want to make sure that where we're building, we make sure that we're accessible to everybody.
I think you're right about changes in educational. These days, a lot of people that I knew growing up, they go to coding boot camps instead of going to college, and then they go out and get a six-figure job.
Right.
just from a year coding boot camp. So I think it's very different now.
Yeah, and then they say to you, who earned your degree, ha 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 ha.
Oh, you're still there. Yeah.
And guess what you're going to be looking at for a tuition? Okay. So, having said that, the next item on the agenda is an update on the development of the initial draft transportation expenditure plan. And we have a draft. That's what we have. So, hi. You're going to be presenting to us, and just a quick question. Do you want us to hold our questions and comments, or is it all right if we ask you while you're presenting?
I just have some quick comments, and then after the quick comments, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, so if you'll introduce yourself.
Good evening, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Tim Hale, the Deputy Executive Director for Projects for Contra Costa Transportation Authority, and I'm here to provide you an update on the development of the initial draft transportation expenditure plan. The Authority Board elected to move forward with developing this initial draft TEP in May of this year with approving a work plan, and in June a schedule to work towards the approval of a TEP and ordinance to place another sales tax on the ballot in March of 2020. And so we are on a summertime schedule to develop the TEP and really seek your feedback as well as the public feedback, stakeholder feedback as we move through this process. The overall schedule, I think you may have received an update last month, but the overall schedule right now is we are planning to release an initial draft transportation expenditure plan hopefully in the next few weeks for stakeholder and public input. And we will be, and I'll be covering a little bit more about what the public outreach plan looks like later in my comments. And in August of this year, we will have the Authority Board will be meeting weekly to discuss the final draft of the TEP and then authorizing its release to the cities and the County Board of Supervisors for resolutions of support. And then in November of this year, the County Board of Supervisors will be considering the call for election and the consolidation of the ballot of March in 2020 and the consideration of the authority's ordinance for placing another sales tax on the measure. So that's our schedule that we're on right now, and happy to answer any questions about that after my comments. And this all really started with doing some initial public opinion research. And in that public opinion research, we found that 80% of people in Contra Costa County still feel the greater need for more transportation funding in Contra Costa County. And that was, I'm sure some of you may have remembered, the authority was unsuccessful in 2016 with a ballot measure for Measure X. And during that time, when we did polling, there was only a 75% result of greater need for transportation funding. So not only is it increased, but the intensity is also increased. In 2016, there was a 36% of great need, and this latest public opinion research found 45% to be of great need for transportation funding. And during that poll, there was a number of things that came out of it. The public was really interested in, what are we actually going to get out of this measure? What am I going to get out of this measure? And so we are making sure we craft a measure that's really meaningful to the public in terms of outcomes, as well as direct benefits, as well as meeting some of their highest priorities, which their highest priority is obviously reducing congestion in Contra Costa County. Not only on our freeways and corridors, but also on our arterials and local streets and major streets in all of our communities. And also making the BART stations more accessible, cleaner, safer, protecting open space, requiring the funds directly benefit the local residents. So that's there was a lot of concerns about accountability. And so I'll talk a little bit more later, but we do have articles in this transportation expenditure plan that's carrying over from the 2016 TEP as it relates to taxpayer safeguards and accountability, as well as the creation of a public oversight committee. So another priority is improving air quality, and also making sure that one of the big things was improving the frequency, the reliability, and also the connectivity of transit in Contra Costa County. And I'll talk a little more about that, but that was a big priority for the public as it related to, it went hand in hand with congestion relief as it relates to making sure that there was reliable transit, but also making sure that there was alternative modes that were accessible and reliable other than the single occupant vehicle. The transportation expenditure plan as it sits now, we've been meeting and circulating around the regional transportation planning committees in all of the 4 subregions, and the way the expenditure plan is being crafted as it stands now, that will be released in July, is the authority board has stated that they have a goal of 50% of that expenditure plan to be dedicated to transit and alternative modes, as well as 26% for local improvements. So that's direct improvements inside all of your communities, and then 21% for freeways and interchange improvements. And all of that combined provides that congestion relief that everyone is really looking for. And so another way that you could really split up the expenditure plan is you could look at it from the standpoint of 50% of the dollars are going directly benefiting or relieving congestion, and the other 50% is going into countywide programs for transit, affordable transportation, walking, biking, reducing emissions, improving air quality, as well as focused growth, economic development, creating jobs in Contra Costa. So I can certainly talk more about the TEP in terms of specific categories during our discussion. The other component of the TEP is the policies. So there are a number of policies that we will be maintaining from the Measure J expenditure plan, as well as from the 2016 transportation expenditure plan, the growth management plan and urban limit line, the complete streets policy, advanced mitigation program for environmental protection, and then taxpayer safeguards and accountability. And in that, we will have, as I mentioned, the Public Oversight Committee to be able to do annual reporting, performance audits of the authority and how we're doing our expenditures, also maintenance of effort for all local jurisdictions, as well as a performance-based review. So making sure that essentially what we're doing is we're making sure that in the future, and not that we don't already do it, but we're making sure that we have criteria to make sure that we're funding the best projects in Contra Costa County, as well as a new component, which is a 10-year expenditure plan review. So as we all know, transportation is changing rapidly these days, and we wanted to make sure that the authority had the ability to review, at a minimum, every 10 years, the expenditure plan to make sure that it's meeting the transportation needs and goals in Contra Costa County. Some new policies that we're considering are a transit policy, and because this TEP is 50% directed towards transit and alternative modes, we found the need to create a policy to kind of govern those expenditures, and so we're developing a policy that is, and you heard a little bit earlier in today's meeting about transit first, and so making sure that transit's being considered in every aspect of not just the regional projects but also local projects, and also tying in a integrated transit plan. So that's a countywide plan that would work directly with the 4 transit operators in Contra Costa County to really knit together a seamless, integrated, unified customer experience for transit through all of Contra Costa County, because the public doesn't really care if there's 4 transit operators. All they care about is that there's a workable, reliable transit system in Contra Costa County. The other policy that we are looking at is a Vision Zero policy. And so this, if you're not familiar with Vision Zero, this is something that's very emerging right now in transportation, not only here but nationwide and in the world. and this is a focused goal to eliminate fatalities and accidents in Contra Costa County as it relates to transportation. And so our goal is to really fold that policy into the other number of policies we have for complete streets, the transit policy, as well as develop a Vision Zero plan to really focus on some of the critical hotspots in Contra Costa County. So we're taking a more proactive approach to mitigating and reducing fatalities in Contra Costa County. I mentioned we're going to be starting to do public outreach, and so the way we're going to be doing that is through a number of telephone town halls. Excuse me. And that was very successful in 2016. It really provided a significant amount of outreach as compared to your standard community outreach meetings where you may only have 20, 30, 40, 50 people attend. The telephone town halls, we were experiencing participation of 10,000 people, and what we plan on holding a telephone town hall in each of the subregions, as well as complementing that with community meetings. And we're also this time, because of the summer schedule, providing stipends to community-based organizations to actually hold their own informational booths for the Transportation Expenditure Plan. We will also have an engagement survey and tool, as well as your informational material. So this is, really happy to receive any feedback or input, take any questions, and just really want to provide an opportunity for you to shape the plan. So that concludes my presentation, and happy to take any questions.
So comments and questions?
Thank you. What percent do you need to pass this?
2/3 majority vote.
And what was the percent the last time?
64%, so we need 67%.
Mm-hmm. How secure are you on the results of that survey, the first survey? I mean, the survey was just completed.
It's a really good question. I didn't actually mention that. So in the poll, we tested an outcomes-based ballot question in the poll, and out of that, there was a 75% outcome of yes for another sales tax measure.
Other comments and questions?
If I may, Mr. Hale, I was at the meeting last Wednesday, and I think I understood a few things, but maybe you could clarify if I didn't. My understanding from the surveys that have been done so far is the main issue is congestion. Another issue coupled with that is people want accountability. That is, if they vote for this measure in March of 2020, they want some mechanism to make sure that what was promised that made them vote for the measure will actually be delivered. Did I hear that correctly?
That is absolutely correct.
Go ahead.
I like your outcomes approach on this because I know when I look at these ballot measures for statewide ballots, I'm always going to, okay, what's in it for me? And for example, making BART safer, clean, and reliable, I'd really want to know what that means because yes, it needs to be safer, it needs to be cleaner, it needs to be reliable, but what are you really doing that I could walk into a BART station and see it?
So that's a very good question, so thank you for that. So that particular category is what we're calling station modernization within not only stations within Contra Costa County, but making sure that there's a system-wide approach with BART to make sure that there's a one for one or dollar for dollar match of local dollars, matching that with other fund sources that BART has to make sure that there is increased safety, security, cleanliness, also reliability of fare gates, and also improving and reducing the fare evading practices at each of the BART stations. And so the idea is that you're modifying the fare gates, you're modifying the elevators, you're also making sure that the stations are clean So that would include frequent power washing, et cetera. And so and also making sure that there's the proper enforcement at the BART stations as well.
Okay, that's all very well and good, and we're looking forward to that, but what if BART says, no, I'm not going to match it?
Then they don't get the local money.
Then we don't have the improvements then.
So we could redirect those dollars potentially through discussions with the RTPCs and BART to have other benefits at the BART stations.
Well, considering the news of the last several months about BART, I would be surprised if they could do what you're proposing, use the money for. In fact, if we could encourage them, and you could encourage them to do that, you could become the general manager of BART, because she just couldn't do it. And hopefully the new general manager of BART, who's coming on board, I think, this coming month in July, has a chance at it. But, I mean, everybody in this room reads what's going on at BART. They can't even collect the fares adequately. In fact, today in the paper it said that I believe somewhere between 5 and 15% of the people who are using the system don't pay. So I'm very pessimistic at this moment, but I'm an optimist at heart. But nevertheless, I know what you're trying to do. It's a big challenge. What do you think?
Well, excuse me, if I can tag on to that, it's not only do they not pay, there isn't any avenue for enforcement. So while safety is a major concern, we just don't have what is necessary to enforce. And fare evasion is a very, very, it's just high on the list.
Right. I read an article today that of the thousands of tickets issued, there's no law enforcement behind them. There's no court enforcement, so they go to the Franchise Tax Board. And so far, one fine of $95 has been paid out of 2,500 or so tickets. But more importantly for us, for you, I trust in the 9 months between now and the election, there will be serious discussions with BART to see what they would be willing to come up with to match the funds, if this passes, that Contra Costa County will have to do this.
So we are actively coordinating with BART and writing very specific funding requirements for this category. And BART has been very cooperative, and we know that this is one of their highest priorities. And the goal is to, work with BART and develop essentially a system-wide plan so we can understand what is going to be not only the system-wide, but the direct benefits to the county as it relates to these goals before we even actually do any allocations of dollars to BART. So it's making sure we have a plan in place, making sure that it's one-to-one, and we know how we're matching it with other fund sources, and that way we understand what the direct benefit is before we actually allocate the funds. I also will say that even after the plan is developed, each specific project then has to go through the RTPCs to be approved. And that's our normal process as well. So there's going to be a number of accountability measures and decision points to make sure that these funds are being, that will be benefiting Contra Costa residents.
I have a question. I have two questions. Okay. First of all, the gentleman who was here at our last meeting, who represents the unincorporated area of Contra Costa County, said that we were no longer going to call State Route 239 the airport connector. And I'm looking on page 9. Is it now going to be called the Vasco Road Byron Road connector? Is that what will we refer to it as?
So that's also a very good question. No, actually, local Byron Vasco connector is essentially it's a county road that would then connect Byron Vasco and Byron together. I can give you an update on the 239. So the last week at the authority board meeting, there was we're actually planning on releasing an RFP to start evaluating the 239 again and understanding all of the concerns. We're really trying to evaluate really what are the next steps for that project and how feasible that project really is.
We're still deciding whether or not it's feasible.
Mm-hmm. So that project has to go through the environmental document phase.
Again?
No, it hasn't gone through the environmental document phase. Yeah.
Oh. Okay. So is this somewhat of a setback? Or are we still supposedly moving forward slowly?
So we are moving forward. I think what we're trying to determine is, what is the best alternative to move forward with, and understand, because I think there's two parts to that. One is it still? Because I think in the previous studies, it was being studied as a toll road, and we're not even sure if the project is even financially feasible. And so we're going to be evaluating that in this next phase, as well as evaluating the corridors and the alternatives. And so in the end of that study, it very well might be that Vasco Road, Byron Highway may become 239, but that's too early to tell. That's too early to tell until we actually complete the study.
Okay. And then my second question is, coming off of Lone Tree Way and taking the exit to Martinez, which puts you up on 4, they are building a huge parking lot. And what is that parking lot for?
Are you referring to the parking lot by the Antioch BART station?
No. I'm talking about, I'm pretty sure it's a parking lot. It's on Lone Tree Way, on the south side of Lone Tree Way, right next to Highway 4.
I don't know the answer to that question.
It's huge. It's a huge parking lot. Okay.
We can check with local staff and see if we can get you
Okay.
maybe a local project.
Thank you.
Okay, Sam.
Thank you. So I was overhearing about having funds for cleaning services and helping with fare evasions for the BART system. I know that we're probably halfway through with getting new trains. I was wondering, were there certain things done with CCTA and BART about increasing the throughput of BART so that way more people could sit there and say, okay, well, it makes sense for us because we'll get a seat,
So are you asking about additional BART cars or?
I was more of looking forward to hearing something more about a larger plan about expanding the throughput. I mean, BART as a system was set up in the 70s and then they added stations. But I'm not sure if, from what I hear, the additional BART cars go any farther than the station or the headways were reduced by that way trains run faster, more trains.
So that's a good question. So that was a big component of BART passing measure RR as well as regional measure 3. And there is a plan to replace the current fleet, which is targeted over 700 cars. There is also a plan to purchase over 300 additional cars. And prior to that, though, BART needs to replace the train control system in order to add additional cars to increase the capacity and throughput and minimize the headways. That train control system is still in the planning phases, It has been, the estimated time frame is within the next 10 years that train control system would be in place. So in the funding requirements within this transportation expenditure plan, and this was actually discussed at last week's authority board meeting, depending on when that train control system is put in place, the authority board could, obviously in coordination with the RTPCs and stakeholders, could consider making an allocation to purchase additional cars if there is any excess capacity in the transportation expenditure plan at the time.
Thank you.
Other comments and questions? Haley?
Yeah, so one of the reasons I no longer commute on BART is it's such a hassle to get from my house to BART because I don't live within walking distance anymore. And I think that's a concern that a lot of people have. And I thought, in here you've mentioned a couple times first mile, last mile. So I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit more.
So thank you for that. Yes, we have, it really comes down to this transit policy, this integrated transit plan. The authority is strongly is focused in investing in first and last mile solutions, and that's pretty clear through some of the on-demand transit pilots that we're working with on some of the transit operators, as well as the shared autonomous vehicle project that we're doing at Bishop Branch. And so we do have this vision to have a network of shared mobility hubs, as well as a network of alternative options that can better serve fixed route bus service, as well as fixed rail service like BART. So we just received a grant from USDOT. It's called the Advanced Transportation Congestion Management Technology Deployment Grant, ATC-MTD grant. But that grant is actually a $17.6 million grant to develop a mobility as a service or mobility on demand platform to basically serve first and last mile. And what that is it's an app where you put in your origin, your destination, it shows you all your mobility options, and you're able to schedule, pay, track, and receive rewards for your trip, or what we'll be calling a journey in the future, because it connects different modes together. And through that platform, we will also provide the personalized mobility options. So that could be in the expenditure plan, we have a category called Seamless Connected Transportation Options, and that's funding things like bike share, car share, on-demand transit, share mobility hubs, as well as this platform in terms of data sharing and making sure we're putting data out there so people can make better decisions about their commute. And this integrated transit plan is to really focus on, what is that core transit network and how do we better serve that core transit network with better first and last mile options for on-demand transit, and also working closer with private transportation services as well.
Hi there. So you mentioned earlier that we failed to meet the 2/3 that we needed for this to pass previously, and I wondered if there were any part of the county where we had seen particularly low approval rates, and if we adequately addressed the needs of that part of the county, if so, in this plan that's been put together now.
So that's another great question. So South County and East County were definitely challenging in the 2016 TEP. We are working closely with the representatives and RTPCs and SWAT and Transplan to make sure that we're meeting their needs in this transportation expenditure plan.
Okay. Well, I'm from West County, so I have more questions about that. Around sort of the 2.6% of the budget here that's committed for, projected for ferry service and commuter rail. Can you sort of help me understand what the split is between those two things? And what have we seen so far in terms of this being, like ferry service actually being widely adopted or successful? Like, how can we get folks excited about that?
So I wish I had the exact number splits for you, but the the primarily focus in West County for ferry service and intercity rail are primarily expanding the Richmond ferry service because that's been extremely successful. Ridership is meet and have gone above all projections on Richmond ferry service. We're also in the process of talking to WIDA about expanding that service to weekend service because there's such a high demand for it already. We also may consider expanding that service from Richmond. Right now it goes from Richmond to San Francisco. We may consider going from Richmond to Larkspur. And then in terms of the intercity rail component, that would potentially be the new train stop in Hercules for the Capital Corridor.
Well, and there's some ferry considerations from Hercules as well. Is there any committed for that?
Yeah. So we are looking at, I think it was 2015 or 2016, we completed a ferry feasibility study in Contra Costa County, and that identified ferry stations or stops in Hercules, Martinez, Antioch. And so with this transportation expenditure plan, we are definitely looking at ferry service from Antioch to Martinez and Hercules and expanding Richmond.
I see sort of through the plan here, there's a lot of sections where we cite just like incentivizing commuters to make different options. What sort of incentives are you talking about?
So that goes hand in hand with what I was just mentioning in terms of this mobility of service and mobility on demand. But it also goes just with our own current programs. Right now, we have a very successful transportation demand management program at Contra Costa County, both with West County, Central County, East County, and South County. And so what we're trying to do is we understand that, and this really goes hand in hand with our Innovate 680 program and other type programs in the county. But we're looking at, we're getting to the point where we're not going to be able to widen our freeways anymore. And so basically we have to make sure that we're providing alternative modes of transportation along those corridors. And in some cases, there might be the need to actually incentivize people to change their behaviors in order to achieve mode shift in these corridors, so that way we can relieve congestion. And so that could be done in a number of ways. I'm happy to go into more details, but that's primarily what those funds are in those various corridor categories.
Well, are we talking like sort of like free rides on certain things, using express lane? What's it planned?
It could go to discounts on your transportation passes to BART, express lanes. It could even go as far as receiving gift cards to Starbucks, Amazon, things like that as well.
One last question. So I saw an example for sort of central here that we're obviously trying to make improvements on congestion and on 680. The example sort of given here is just from Walnut Creek north. And I really wonder what the plan is even for 24, where it joins up with Walnut Creek, and we have this persistent backlog on 680, if that's something that we've planned to address in here somewhere.
Yeah, so you'll see a category. I'm trying to know what version you're looking at. There is a category in there for basically looking at transit reliability and relieving congestion on State Route 24, as well as modernizing the Caldecott tunnels. Because not only is there, like right now on westbound 24, you have people leaving the county in the fourth bore that was just constructed. It's got great capacity, standard shoulders. But we're also looking at ways to improve people's commute coming into Contra Costa County, in the afternoon. And that might be, and this is going to sound kind of odd, but just better lighting in the tunnels. Just improving lighting in tunnels will improve capacity in the tunnels, because if you notice, when people go into the tunnels, they slow down. And so if you had better lighting, people would have to slow down. That would increase speeds, increase capacity. So it's little things like that that we're looking at to help improve capacity. And then that also goes hand in hand with looking at providing better transit reliability on the 24 corridor. There's also noted interchange improvements at Arenda. So those are some of the projects that we're kind of looking at in the TEP.
All right, so that's sort of like not within sort of, I guess, the same scope then of what I'm talking about, and that running up to 24 on 680 North.
So 24 680 North, that is the Innovate 680 project. So we just approved a contract last week to look at northbound
Okay.
express lanes. So Innovate 680, I'm not sure how familiar you all are with Innovate 680, and maybe I need to come back and give you all a presentation about Innovate 680. But Innovate 680 is our seven strategy approach to reducing congestion on 680. And the first two strategies are reducing and cooling hotspots in the corridor, was essentially specifically looking at the bottleneck at 24, adding capacity improvements between Livorno and Rudgear, also between Treat and Lawrence Way, and really addressing that huge bottleneck in Walnut Creek. And then also completing the express lane network on the 680 corridor. So extending the express lanes from Rudgear all the way to Benicia Martinez Bridge. And that means closing the HOV carpool lane gap between 24 and 242, converting that to an express lane, and making sure that you've got essentially a continuous high occupancy toll lane, express lane, all the way up from basically from Alcosta all the way to Benicia Martinez Bridge. That's strategy 1 and 2. Strategy 3 is to provide high capacity transit in the 680 corridor by doing part-time transit lane and running buses hard shoulder running in the shoulders, and doing that basically from Bishop Ranch up to Walnut Creek BART station as a pilot. And then if that's successful, we would then extend that down to Dublin. The fourth strategy is innovative operational strategies. And so that's looking at leveraging technology. As you know, CCTA is really big in technologies. Leveraging technologies to better coordinate traffic flow and synchronize traffic among the local roads, the ramps, and the freeway system. The fifth strategy is preparing the corridor for the future. I think all of you realize that the future of transportation is holding in connected vehicles and connected transportation and autonomous vehicles, and really preparing the corridor for that type of technology, which does require infrastructure. And then the sixth strategy is looking at first and last mile solutions. So it's how do we bring people down from, say, the outer suburbs of Walnut Creek, Clayton. How do we bring those people down to the 680 corridor through this shared mobility hub network to connect with high capacity transit without using their car? My goal is to have connectivity without having to drive and park somewhere. So instead of increasing parking at Park and Rise, I want to maintain and get more people to come to Park and Rise without having to park. And then the seventh strategy is the transportation demand management, which is essentially the mobility as a service platform that I mentioned earlier. So that grant actually funds the seventh strategy of Innovate 680. So that whole concept is what we call Innovate 680, and it's essentially a pilot that essentially starts in Bollinger Canyon, goes all the way up to State Route 4. And if those suite of strategies work in the 680 corridor, we could expand that throughout the rest of the Contra Costa County.
I think, speaking for myself anyway, I definitely would love to have more of a deep dive on the Innovate 680, and also just understand, the split between the cost and intercity commuter rail and whatnot. One thing I can't help but wonder, after you sort of mentioned sort of the different versions of this plan we may have seen, is this the final version? Is it going to change after the town halls? And how do we keep on top of actually where it lands before it goes to the voters?
So the version that was in last week's packet, I don't know if you heard the meeting last week. So last week, the authority board directed staff to look at a better way to consolidate and package the TEP into more of signature type projects. So we've been actively working on that. Right now, you will see, you have a various project funding categories. So what we're doing is we're consolidating those categories into 3 major signature projects, essentially the 680-24 bottleneck, the 684 bottleneck, and as well as East County transit extension and the Byron Vasco Road connector, and then also I-8. So that's one giant project, signature project, and then the I-80 corridor in West County and providing congestion relief to the I-80 corridor. That draft, we just had an ad hoc committee meeting today per direction from the authority board last Wednesday, and we plan on releasing, to answer your direct question, we plan on releasing a initial draft TEP to stakeholders and publics in middle of July, and at that time, we're open to all input, feedback, and communication on the TEP, so that way we can really craft it and shape it into to meet everyone's needs and bring all that input back to the authority board in August to consider that for a final draft TEP in August.
What's the most constructive way to influence that once it gets to that mid-July release?
So there'll be a number of ways. As I mentioned in the public outreach, there'll be engagement tools, informational material, community-based meetings, telephone town halls, but also just good old-fashioned letters and emails.
All right, thanks.
Talk about putting you through the grill, Hunter. Thank you so much for your presentation. I think you need to come back and maybe the only speaker when you come back. But we really appreciate it. I did have an opportunity to look at this and say Highway 4 is the most congested to San Francisco, or is the second most congested?
So I don't know if you all track MTC Vital Signs, but there's a website called the MTC Vital Signs, and they actively update where the segments of most congested corridors in the Bay Area. And I can't recall the exact, but I know it's in the top 3. State Route 4 between Marella and 242 has raised into the top 3 congested corridors in the Bay Area.
Right where Port Chicago is planning on building 14,000 homes. Okay. One other comment on my end is public transportation, which is near and dear to my heart. Looking at the buses that are empty. So something needs to be done about that. And there are plenty of people who could utilize and benefit from bus service, but we're not reaching out to those people. And then the bus doesn't come for an hour. So that's not an alternative. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
So I have a comment to make. Number one, I have a speaker who would like to address the committee, and this is Chris Lepe. Okay, and Chris, I will provide you a limitation of 3 minutes to give us your comment, and then I have an announcement to make. I got to get out of here. Okay.
Sounds good. Thank you. Good evening. My name is Chris Lepe. I'm the Regional Policy Director for Transform. We're an nonprofit organization here in the Bay Area that focuses on creating more walkable communities and providing excellent transportation options for people to get around, and really kind of focused in on affordability, affordable transportation, affordable housing options, and addressing the climate crisis. The letter I'm passing around for y'all here is a letter that we submitted to the CCTA board last week and highlights some kind of key concerns and recommendations that we have come together to share on behalf of multiple organizations. And you can see those the organizations at the end of the letter there, including Greenbelt Alliance, Bike East Bay, we're going to Save Mount Diablo. You'll see it's about close to a dozen here. So among the different kind of points to be made, first and foremost, especially since Measure X passed, or didn't pass, sorry, there is larger concerns around the issue of the climate crisis and the correlation between our transportation investments and greenhouse gas emissions. And it's just a much greater concern now than it was then, and therefore needs to be front and center as far as making sure that these investments, whether it be in highway or public transit, really do maximize greenhouse gas emission reductions and are focused around moving more people with fewer cars, rather than sort of the old school way of going around things about, adding more capacity to our roads to encourage effectively more people to drive. We also agree with staff in terms of the performance orientation of the measure, but do have some kind of questions and concerns about how that's actually going to work, and just making sure that, for example, yes, we have a clear, transparent process that really incentivizes competition and a drive to the top, right? Another big theme is social equity. This is a regressive sales tax measure. So this is going to tax low-income people more as a percentage of their income than higher-income people at a time when inequality and the affordability crisis is peaked in the Bay Area. This is also something that's changed to a considerable degree since Measure X failed. And therefore, we feel very strongly that the investments need to focus on those communities, on those commuters, making sure that the disproportionate benefits go to low-income folks and the folks that have the greatest transportation barriers in our communities. Overall, we've seen progress between Measure X and this proposal in terms of the amount going towards public transportation and sustainable modes, although we're not quite clear about what's in that box of the 50%, and are looking forward to learning more about that. And just to say that despite the progress since Measure X, other counties have passed recently other sales tax measures that are somewhere in the ballpark of two-thirds to three-quarters for public transit and active transportation. So, clearly we can do more, we can do better, and happy to have further conversation with any of you after. Thanks.
Chris, thank you so much. And I appreciate the fact that you bought a handout for us to review it for later. Very grateful. Thank you. I need to make an announcement, a personal announcement. And first of all, I want to welcome our newest members to our committee. Next time we get together, we'll have an opportunity to get to know each other a little bit better. But welcome. And I know that you know now you've got to speak quick. So what that you're the new kid on the block? We don't care. You just jump in there. I am auditioning for, I'm going to be singing the national anthem, and that would be at an event at the city of Lafayette, July 13th, write it down, July 13th, but that's okay, you'll send it out. And it's a tribute to the troops at the Lafayette Reservoir. Bring your own picnic. It's at 4 o'clock. So if those who want to sing need to audition, and I will be auditioning at 8 o'clock, I think, to sing the national anthem. And so I need to leave. But I also want to let you know that I did bring my children to this event, and I think they graciously came. I don't know. They look like they're happy. So my son Matthew in the back and my daughter Heather. So thank you very much. I will see you next month, July 24th, and I will hand the gavel to my co-chair, Larry, who is just the best.
Well, we're at that stage in the agenda for reports, and I'm wondering if anyone has attended any of the meetings during the last month, and if they would like to report on what they saw. Seeing none, okay. Any member or staff comments at this time? Matt?
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to thank you guys for paying so much attention to Tim's presentation, and we will continue to keep you updated on the progress of the TEP, either through Tim or myself or other staff members at your regular meetings. We do go dark in August, so we'll have to rely on emails or social media, but we want you to know what's going on, but we also, you can attend our authority meetings or listen to our authority meetings. That's where you hear the real detailed discussions. They are long, but you really get to hear the compromises and trade-offs between funding Project A versus Program B. So I encourage you to tune into the special TEP meetings that you see on the schedule in there. They're going on almost every week throughout the summer. So we will brief you, and we assume we'll have a July meeting and then update you again in September. But like Tim mentioned, the draft will become final on August 21st. So that will be a good meeting to listen to if you decide to actually tune in.
Okay, thank you, Matt. No one else had any comments, I don't think. I had one quick one I wanted to make. You may recall last month when Robert Sarmiento, representing the city or the county of Contra Costa, made a presentation. I asked him about areas in the county that the county is responsible for, unincorporated areas. And it occurred to me after the meeting, and I emailed Robert about the condition of Bailey Road, which is a heavily traveled route between Concord and Pittsburgh. And it goes through the Naval Weapons Station. And the road has just deteriorated tremendously. Potholes, broken pavement, hardly any shoulders. And there's one particular point where if you get off the edge of the road, it's like 20 feet down.
It's a dead man's
And you're going to
curve.
be upside down. And there's been several accidents, in the last month or two. And when something like that happens, traffic can usually just has to reverse course and go back the way they were coming from. So I asked Robert, if he could look into that, and he got back to me and told me that he was forwarding the issues with repairing Bailey Road onto another person. I forgot the name now, but he's in that responsible department with the county. And Bailey Road is a little complicated because 3 jurisdictions have responsibility for Bailey Road. And Pittsburgh, obviously, Concord, obviously, and the county. And they don't necessarily have clear demarcations, where one begins and ends. And I think that, well, not to get into that, but anyway, I asked them if they could somehow come to an agreement between the 3 entities to somehow do something about the Bailey Road issues. I mean, it needs to be repaved or repaired because we're going to have more serious accidents with the speed that many of these commuters employ going to and from their destinations. So I just wanted to let you all know that I had taken that route, got in touch with the county about that, and if you have any other comments about that issue, I'd be happy to speak with you afterwards. Okay. Any other? Yes, Patricia.
Yes. What you're saying is exactly what happened in Byron on Camino Diablo. And the person that we have been working with, his name is Mike Stiles, and he is wonderful to work with. We do have, most of Camino Diablo now paved, but it honestly, it made a difference. I believe that I was here for 4 years now, and they will get it done, but don't stop. Keep keep the communication going. It made a huge difference for us. And Tim, I am concerned about 239. I just want to make sure that you understand it's been on the books to build since 1959. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. If there's no further business, we are adjourned until July 24th. Thank you.
Right about that. It's a dead man's curve.